Recording now. I'm gonna do a little introduction, and then we're good to go. So in three, two, one. Hey everyone, my name is Andre Walton. I am the Southeast Regional Organizer for OWR, and welcome to The Revolution, where we interview political candidates and activists. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. His name is Leopold, co-founder of the Labor Institute and author of Runaway Inequality, an activist guide to economic justice. Thank you for joining us today, Les. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. I'm really glad to have you. We recently had you on our economic justice town hall. You provided some really key information, and I really wanted to get you on this interview to actually expand that conversation we started to have on that town hall. So before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you co-founded the Labor Institute?
Yeah, I was an intern when I was in graduate school with a guy named Tony Mazzocchi, who was at that point, health and safety director for the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union in in Washington. And he felt this was in the mid 1970s, and he felt the economy was starting to fall apart for working people, and he wanted progressive economics taught to working people. So he asked me to see if I could find people to do that. I wasn't quite ready to do that myself. And I ran into a group of economists at the Union for Political Radical Economists, one guy named David Gordon, who passed away, unfortunately, a while back. But I got him to do a sample course, and out of that grew the Labor Institute. And our mission was to try to provide popular education on political economy for working people. And we're talking about oil, chemical, and atomic workers for starters. So that's what we've been trying to do ever since. Although we've had to earn a living, we've branched out into other areas as well. But that's, at least for me, that's my main area.
Most definitely. Cool. So I think what really interested me about your book was that I think we all have this kind of general sense that something's not particular right with our economic system. But, I feel like few people actually know how bad it is. And you kind of touched on this in your book when you kind of put in some survey questions about how people see like the CEO gap versus the reality of it. Can you talk about how our financial system changed over the last 40 to 50 years?
Well, yeah, but that's a tall order, but I'll try to give you some of the basics. Up until the late 1970s, the financial system in the United States was pretty tightly regulated. I mean, Wall Street, the things that make stock markets run and deals, financing of the banking system in general. And that was a result of the trauma of the Great Depression, that the New Deal put in very strict controls. And it was successful enough that the wages on Wall Street were no different than the wages in any other sector, given the level of skill and education and so on. So maybe bankers' hours were a little less severe than working at General Motors, but the average annual income was about the same. So it wasn't this princely domain that it has become. Well, the 1970s were a very difficult period because the oil shocks and some other things had sent inflation skyrocketing and unemployment was rising. And the policymakers didn't know what to do. And they kind of gave up on Keynesian economics, with a strong hand role for the government. And both parties turned towards this, what we now call neoliberalism, and which really was a massive deregulatory model, which is very simply put, what it was all about was get the government out of the economy. And that means, cut taxes, cut regulations, privatize. These are all the things one needs to do to get the private sector to really hum again. And we do that, and we'll get out of this mess. So we found liberal legislators like Ted Kennedy calling for more competition in the airlines industry, which was also tightly controlled. About 12% of the economy was very tightly regulated. And they thought if you break up, competition will bring down prices and then all things will be good. Well, the deregulation model was, when it came to finance, was an absolute afterthought. Nobody was paying any attention, but the financiers were. And they saw this as an incredible opportunity to get out from under the thumb of the regulators. So as this climate took off during the Reagan administration and the Carter into the Reagan administration, the Wall Street hustlers really started pushing the envelope about what they could do and what they couldn't do. And one of the two things they learned how to do in a hurry. One was to buy up companies using borrowed money and then stick the debt on the company. That was frowned upon before that. There wasn't a lot of that going on. But in the new atmosphere, the regulators let that go. And the second thing they did, and this was just a regulatory change in 1982, they allowed the company to use as much of its money as it wanted to buy back its own shares, a stock buyback. And this is important, and it sounds arcane almost, but it's important. This wasn't allowed before, since 1933, basically, because this was considered stock manipulation. Stock buyback means you can use the company's price to increase the demand for the shares. Well, who owns the shares? Well, the corporate raiders, which we called them back then, now they're called hedge funds and private equity companies, but they do the same thing. They come in and buy up the company, stick the debt on the company, and then extract money out. And one of the best ways to extract money out is through stock buybacks, because it raises the value of the shares. Also, they started paying the CEOs. When they bought a company, they stuck in their own CEOs, and the pay went from, it was 85%, used to be 85% salaries and wages and 15% stocks. And it switched, it turned completely around. It's now 85% stocks and stock options, and the rest wages. So the only way anybody can make any money is if the stock went up. So the CEOs, in collusion with the hedge funds and private equity companies, went on a rampage and basically turned corporate America into one gigantic stock buyback machine. So the law in 1982 was 2% of your corporate profits could go to stock buybacks. That was it. Once they took the cap off, by the time of the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, it was 70 cents out of every dollar in profits went to stock buybacks. Went from 2 cents to 70 cents. And it's now went down a little bit. Now it's back up to about 68, 69 cents. So the business of corporate America became, and the business of Wall Street was engineering these leverage buyouts, engineering a way to take over company after company after company, and then extract. The term I used is financially strip mine, but people don't know what strip mines are anymore. But to rip the insides of the company out, turn it over to the big corporate investors and the CEOs who get paid only really through stock buybacks. So this changed the whole model of corporate America. Completely turned it upside down.
Well, let's elaborate on kind of the ramifications of all this changing of the financial economy. And what we've seen as a result is we've seen obviously a stagnation of wages. We've seen kind of this destruction of the union class and the unionization of workers. And what I've seen is that there's also been, this situation where inequality is not just through wages, but it's also inequality through our politics. Can you talk about the correlation of how economic inequality is also increasing political inequality?
Sure. I'm glad you made that connection, because these days, I think talking just about the economic picture is not enough. When you have the situation you just described, when you have a generation of stagnating incomes in a country that assumed that every generation would do a little better than the previous one, and that was across the board. That was not just Anglos. That was an assumption that everybody had. There were tremendous inequalities, but the point was that it was going to get better. Once you see it's not getting better, and that permeates through society, you now have the conditions for fascism, authoritarianism. A word I would never have used 4 years ago, or 5 years ago. You now have the conditions for it. So that's one big thing. The other thing you have is when the top 1% gets more and more and more money, they can buy legislation, right? They bought a $1 trillion tax cut at the beginning of the Trump administration. They just bought it. They are the primary donors of the Republican Party, and that was their fee, as it were. That's what they got for their money. The interesting thing is, we now have data that goes back, a couple of dozen years, and we can show that nothing gets passed in Congress unless the financial elites support it. So what we want to see get passed doesn't get passed unless the people with the money also support it. And if we support it and they don't, it doesn't get passed. And this is there was a review of 1,900 congressional bills, and this is what came out of it. But the point is, when you let the money flow to the top and you don't have any curbs on financial donations, you're going to control the political system. But something deeper is going on. And this I really want to stress for your listeners, is we've entered an incredibly dangerous period. And I am not an alarmist. I really am not, but we're someplace new. When 70%, the Republican Party represents about 29% of the electorate, and 70% of that 29%, about 19%, are stark raving crazy. I mean, they believe that the left did the riots in Washington, right? Antifa caused it, not Trump supporters. They think that Trump won the election. I mean, you've got complete alternative universe going on, but it's not just an alternative universe that's benign. It's an alternative universe that's a threat to everything. So it's a threat to racial progress. It's a threat to doing anything about inequality. It's a threat to democracy. And it puts us in an incredibly awkward position, because now our demands, we have to have two screens going when we think about our demands. There's one set of demands where we say, well, this is what's right and just, and everybody should have, a job at a livable wage and universal health care, and the good social democratic agenda that would go miles and miles and miles to take care of inequality, really make a big difference across the board. But we now have to have an idea of keeping the Republicans out of power. You can't let the bastards get in. You just can't. And now, so that opens up a second conversation, is how do we do that? And the only way to do that, I think, is to go back to what Mazzocchi was trying to teach us back in the 70s, which was you've got to figure out a way to talk to working people who don't see themselves as progressive or radical, don't really see themselves as reactionary or racist, but are kind of trying to make sense out of their life, which has been a mess for a whole generation. Their kids and their kids' kids are doing worse than they are, and they're not doing as well as their parents, and wondering what the hell's going on, and they're looking for an explanation. And what I fear is going on right now is we have the creation of very, very strong silos. We have progressive silos and conservative silos and other kinds of silos, but the progressives have many silos, and it's much more comfortable to stay within our silos and talk to people who already agree with us or lean to us. How to reach out and talk to people that don't already agree with us, but who might, if we actually spent some time with them and actually produced, developed educational forums the way you're doing, that's a real challenge. And most groups do not know how to do that. They may go and canvas and do what they call deep canvas, and talk to a person a couple of times, and maybe that really works. But having people in an ongoing educational relationship, ongoing mutual learning situations, what we need to do en masse. Let me give you one more example of this, how movements are built. Populism has gotten this, pathetically negative name, but it was not a negative American political movement. And you're talking about economics and politics, right? We're talking about the connection here. So during Reconstruction and afterwards, small farmers, black and white, mostly in the Midwest and South, were absolutely getting crushed because the entire financial part of the economy was controlled by Wall Street, basically, and banks in Minneapolis and Chicago. They're all connected, and they made it so that the cost of the loans that farmers needed was more than the price they could get for their products. And they were being squeezed by the railroads and by the grain elevator operators and the stockyards operators and the banks. So they revolted. And this is small black and white farmers revolted. And they started this populist movement. And the way they built it is they put in the field 6,000 lecturers, educators, 6,000 in the late 1880s and 1890s. They went town to town to town to say, it doesn't have to be this way. We could have, the public could own the grain elevators. There could be public banks. We could have co-ops that own the stockyards. And what we tend to forget is between Reconstruction and Jim Crow was basically 20 years of a civil war going on. It was the populists versus the reactionaries. 20 years of this. The first Jim Crow law, I think, was 1898 in New Orleans. Is that when it was? When I think they segregated a legally segregated trolley car. But that wasn't going on. The Bourbons, the elites, the aristocrats, the white supremacists had to kill off the populace, and they got into they probably jumped into political action a little bit too soon in the 1892 and 1896 campaigns when they joined with the Democratic Party. But they set the tone for the next several generations about controlling capitalism, controlling big business, giving labor rights. All that stuff grew out of their education movement. And I think we're at a kind of similar moment. The other side has, Fox News and, all these other influencers and everything else who will lie through their teeth, right, to make a buck. That's what they do, right? That's their business model. Lie, stir people up, get them watching your show, and the politicians get involved, and you've got this echo chamber. The problem is we have one too. Mm-hmm. And the people in the middle are who we have to reach. And some of what we're advocating now ain't going to work there. And, I shudder to think where we'd be if in 2 years, and I never get involved in electoral politics. When the two parties were basically the same, corporate Democrat, neoliberal, when they were the same, which was really, all the way through till Trump, all the way through till Trump. If you want to attack both parties, I'd say go for it. I was involved with Tony Mazzacchi's Labor Party. It's supposed to be a non-electoral formation, but the idea of we were trying to build a place where workers who were disgusted with the Democrats could go, right? Who were disgusted with the free trade, globalization, shut down my plant Democrats. And Mazzocchi kept saying, we don't build something for them, they're going to go to the right. And then Trump outflanked the Democrats on the right on the trade issue. And sure enough, a lot of working people who voted for Obama twice ended up going over to Trump. So now we're someplace new. I can't sit back and just throw stones at the Democratic Party anymore, as much as I would like to, because I'm really worried about these guys getting in, because they will change everything.
I want to touch on that a little bit about, the political division. So obviously we have a very consolidated media apparatus where, just a few corporations owns kind of all our media, which is kind of fueling this political division. But another thing that I've consistently seen either from the left or the right is these political labels that people attach themselves to, but they don't actually know what they mean. For example, somebody might attach themselves as a conservative, progressive, socialist, communist, or whatever. And some of those people who would say, oh, this country will never be socialist, or this country, we don't want socialism. But those are some of the same people who might benefit from a socialist policy such as Social Security or some type of grant that will benefit them. So I think what, as a country or as a political party, what they need to do to kind of grasp the working class party or the working class is to, not focus on, labels, but actually focus on what's going to help working families. And we've kind of seen this, back in the 1940s with FDR. There was a huge red scare, but people loved the fact that they had unionization. They loved the fact they had electrification, which really helped the rural countryside. We love the fact that there was like an infrastructure deal to kind of build new roads. So that is pretty much the core aspect of a kind of a democratic socialism type of economy, but there's still capitalist aspects. So I think it's safe to say that people don't really have a single mindset. They're kind of jumbled up. Like they may have like cultural conservatism, but when it comes to economics, they're probably more left than they think if you just actually help them.
Well,
So how do you think we break down kind of that mindset that, anything government is bad and, we can actually help people with government policies rather than, just stay out of my life?
well, look, that's the big question. Uh, I, I'm involved right now in this Communication Workers of America Runaway Inequality Training Program, and we just had three different train the trainers of the workers who go out and run the program. I don't run them. My staff doesn't run them. The worker trainers that we've trained to be educators run the program. So it, and they're learning how to do it virtually now. That's why we had to do the train the train. They had to retrain them entirely because they weren't able to go out in the field. The union provides 1,000 days of release time for workers to get out of work to go through a program for 8 hours. And I'd say a third of them probably are Trump people or people who have this. Uh, they're all kind of lost in terms of what you said. And one of the trainers who, when they were doing introductions, he basically said exactly what you said. He said, look, what's going on is people come into these training programs and they don't have a framework. They have this issue and that issue, and they don't like government, but they do like government. And they like the military, but they don't like, they're all over the place. And what we provide them is a framework, the runaway inequality framework, and it clicks all these other issues together, and it kind of pushes out a lot of the conspiracy theories. One of the guys, who is a trainer from North Carolina, he says, look, I'm a good old boy. I was a Trump person. My family is all Trump. I got tattoos, a beard, and he says, I went through this program and then some follow-up programs. And when I saw the way working people are being divided by race again and again by corporate America, when I saw that, it got me so angry. It made me a believer. And now he's becoming one of these trainers. He says, it's hard for me to talk to my family. They get all flustered because I bring fact sheets from your book, he tells me, and then they get all jumbled because their lines don't work when I show them material, and we have a good time. So he's what we want. We want to reach people like that and set them loose, and that means getting out of our bubble. Unfortunately, right now is the bubble. What bubbles provide to people, silos provide to people, are very rich identities, right? I'm I'm in DSA. I'm a Black Lives Matter activist. I'm a, in this party or that party, and that makes me something. Gives me uh, a place. And what we're trying to tell people is you can do all that, but you also have to be a movement builder. And you can't build a movement if you're only talking to people who already agree with you, or you're
Mm-hmm.
arguing over fine points. Should it be, $50,000 loan forgiveness or 100% loan forgiveness? That's not the debate. You got to be able to. You got to find out just what you said. You got to find out what's on people. What are people worried about, and does your framework allow them to deal with those concerns? And the other key thing about this, and I got to do the introductions to these train the trainers. Thank goodness we've got staff people that are way more talented than I am in actually training them. But what I stress is what really is education. All education is, all I can do with you, for example, is I can get you to seriously consider what I'm saying, a point of view or some facts. That's all I can do. I have to create an atmosphere where you will seriously consider it, where you have time to think about it, argue about it. But I can't tell you you're right or wrong. I just can't. I can't browbeat you into submission. I can't lecture at you. So we've created a situation where we work all the training is done with workers in groups, looking at small groups, looking at material, and dealing with questions, and giving them the space to be who they are, and they move if you show them that respect. The problem the left has now, or however you want to define it, is the connection between the left and everyday working people isn't there for a large part. I don't know how many, middle of the road working people there are in our revolution anywhere, right? I don't know how many, in any of our left organizations, and so and unions are obviously a small part of the country right now. So making connections, finding a way to get involved in their education programs or reaching those people is becoming very, very difficult, and that's what worries me. Because if we keep talking to ourselves, uh, I've listened to you a couple of times. I mean, you're flat out brilliant. Somebody other than me needs to hear you. You know what I'm saying? Somebody other than our revolution people need to hear you too. You need to be out there with those CWA members, the UAW members, the steelworker members. They would really enjoy hearing from you and debating with you and having these discussions. I don't have a map, a blueprint. I mean, I can bring in the troops. I could bring in trainers to our revolution. We could have a couple of CWA people run a class for you virtually anytime you want. But the real part is going to be when you get to go out there and run some programs for more and more people like you're doing now, but trying to get more and more people who don't normally fall within our circles. And other than if we don't do that, the corporate media is split too right now, right? So you've got your liberal media, quote unquote liberal, like CNN and MSNBC. And you're right, they make their money one way. Fox News makes their money the other way. But the difference is that if the Fox News listeners, who by the way are not driven primarily by your blue collar folks, they are more like the classic petty bourgeoisie who fueled the rise of Nazism and totalitarianism in Europe. I've got a piece coming out soon in American Prospect, and one of the things that we did some original work on who voted for Trump in Pennsylvania, and as a kickoff, there's a group, Chicago Research Study Group or something, looked at 193 of the people that were arrested in Washington at the riot. 193 of them. 40% of them are doctors, lawyers, architects, businessmen. 40%, way bigger than their percentage in the economy as a whole. As they put it, they have a lot to lose. These were not your blue-collar workers on a fringe, even though everybody sort of dressed down. There are a lot of college-educated people. The people who run this ecosystem of the right, from Fox News all the way into all the little corners of the net, I'll bet you 95% or 99% have college educations. So, it's not being driven by your so-called blue-collar service worker, proletariat type person. There's plenty of them in there, but they're up for grabs. And if we vilify them and call them, basically deplorables, if we view the working class as deplorables, and as you know, the working class is extremely integrated now. So what we're doing is slicing out the white people in the working class and calling them deplorables. Uh, that is the ultimate losing strategy. That will kill us. And we'll have a great social democratic program, and Republicans take over either the Senate or the House. Kiss it goodbye. Nothing will get passed. Then everybody will say, "Oh, Congress can't do anything," and who knows who will run for 2004, and we're going to go backwards. And it can get worse and worse and worse. More voter suppression, right?
Right.
And it just can get and rights that we take for granted can be taken away from us.
Well, one of the last points I
Sorry for
want to.
the soapbox.
No, no, that's fine. That's exactly why I wanted you on here. I wanted you to really get out your thoughts that you couldn't fully express on the town hall. But one of the things that I think is fueling this is that there is this kind of political cultural division. I mean, in the 2020 Democratic primary, Elizabeth Warren said she wouldn't go on Fox News to do a town hall or to go on Fox News at all, which was kind of baffling to me. But Bernie Sanders actually did. He did a town hall on Fox News. And I thought that was genius because he's reaching out to those people who are in this echo chamber who don't really get a chance to hear the voices of left, labor movement type voices. And I found that really extremely crazy that, and this happens a lot on the left. They say they don't even want to associate or have people go on Fox News, which doesn't make sense to me because if you don't break through that echo chamber, then how do you expect to build your base and actually win the working class? So I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we have a continued cultural division is because even if you try to reach out to the right or the conservatives, you get labeled as a conservative yourself, even though you're not breaking on your values. Oh. But going back to a historical context, I think we have to go back to, things such as the Poor People's Campaign with Martin Luther King Jr. and also what Fred Hampton was doing with the Black Panthers. They were reaching out to working white class people and working, Puerto Ricans and immigrants. And I think we need to recreate that type of political movement because it's not focused on a cultural norm. It's not focused on, some type of political division. It's saying, if you're a oppressed person, if you're a working class person, join our movement because we have more in common than we actually do. We have differences.
That would be spectacular.
So I think if we want to break the mold and actually, continue to increase our, working class base, we have to, reform what the Black Panthers were doing and reform what the Poor People's Campaign was doing and say, all right, I know we have cultural divisions. You might want abortion and I might be pro-choice, but at the end of the day, we're both broke. And let's get a working class movement and say, hey, you guys are not paying us and pay us what we're owed. And I think that's the only way we can do it.
Well, I totally agree with you on that. And trying to do that that's the anvil that will test you. You'll be banging against that anvil, and that's where you learn. I want to just point out one observation about the Democratic primaries. I was like all in for Bernie the first time around because I thought he could win. I thought Hillary was a weak candidate. I was on it early, saying, "Well, this is dangerous. This is dangerous," precisely because she was so anti-working class in so many ways, and Bernie was really hitting it true. In this last set of primaries, when you step back and look at it, the left, quote, part of the Democratic Party never got much above 30%. They couldn't beat Joe Biden. Joe Biden, right? Who now sounds a whole lot more progressive than he did during the campaign. But how is that possible? What does that tell us about how far out the sort of progressive social democratic vision has gotten? It can't even get to 40% or 50% of the Democratic Party. And this has been going on since I was a kid. I remember I was involved in this peace campaign, a senatorial campaign in 1970. And we couldn't get over a third of the vote for a guy who was a socialist. He won the Democratic primary, Joe Duffy, and He ran against this guy named Low Weicker, and then Tom Dodd, a right-wing communist, ran as an independent, and we got a third of the vote. We got a third of the vote. That was the anti-war progressive core that we had in Connecticut, a very liberal state. So when you got to step back and say, well, why is that? Why, you can't blame somebody else for the very minority position we hold. The only way out of that is exactly what you're talking about, which is when we start to reach out to people who are not like us in terms of, necessarily educational background or, privileges we've had or not had or whatever, but saying, hey, we're poor. We're going to have half the American population have no wealth at all. They're black, white, brown, have no wealth at all. Their assets are less than their liabilities. That's a pretty, that's calling it a poor people's campaign. I think that's the only problem I have with what Reverend Barber is doing is it's too narrow, because a lot of the people we want to reach don't consider themselves poor. Mm-hmm. And calling them poor is almost like an insult. It's really a working person's campaign. Mm-hmm. That's what we're really talking about.
Exactly.
And I think, at least this is my role in life, and you've got a broader skill set than I do, I think. But I think that education has got to be the core of organizing. That you can't just round up the people that already agree with you. You have to reach people that don't agree with you. And the only way to do that is with some sort of neutral territory. And education provides kind of a neutral territory. It's not re-education camp. It's a place to have discussions like your town halls, et cetera. So the problem is, how do we get more people to hear you, to be part of the discussion? Because I think you could lead a very tempered, positive conversation, and you have the desire to reach out. So the question is, somehow, how do you get your podcast to a bunch of working people in Wisconsin, especially Wisconsin, right? It's so key to everything. Look how the election was supposed to be a landslide for Biden, and it was skin of his teeth victory. So there are a lot of people to talk to. I've got a whole slew of relatives there. My in-laws are in Wisconsin. My 97-year-old mother-in-law lives in Glendale, outside of in Milwaukee County. So and there are all kinds of people there. I mean, these are classic working class family. But I remember one of my wife's cousins turns to me. I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm this lefty, totally out of order here. Turns to me during when the air traffic controller strike, when Reagan broke it. He turns to me. This guy's like a chief foreman at construction trades contractor. He turns to me. He says, "You know what? Every working man or woman should have taken their tools and put them down that day, and not gone to work." He was advocating, to me, a general strike. So you got a lot of interesting people bouncing around in Wisconsin, and I hope you get a chance to talk to them. Matter of fact, you have to. If you don't, who's going to talk to them?
Exactly.
If there's anything we can do to help you, like I said, we can get you put on a sample workshop for you. You can see what it's like. You could learn how to do it in a hurry. But what I'd like to see is a strategic plan of how you get to talk to more and more people who don't already, working people who have common problems but don't have it figured out, and aren't going to jump to a radical formation. They're going to be who they are, but they're willing to talk to you. How do you do that over the next 5 to 10 years? You're positioned to do it. And I think if you start doing that, there are a lot of people who are willing to help you, help finance it and everything else. You come up with a good plan.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's something we should definitely do here in Wisconsin. And I think Wisconsin is definitely ripe for that type of conversation. I mean, we're a populous state. I mean, we we kind of swing back and forth between Republican and Democrat on the governor's level, and in these last two elections, we obviously went for Trump and then Biden. So I think people, they're open. They just have to be reached out to, and I think, you know, we have to be willing to have those tough conversations without judging people. Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Trump supporters. They're not racist or bigoted. They're just wondering how they're gonna, keep their farm open, how they're going to, keep their financial situation stable. So I think those are the people we have to reach out to. And obviously, with each political, kind of affiliation, there's always going to be those people who are a little bit too far gone. But there's always those people who can be reached to, and those are the people we should be talking to.
The question is how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
How to create your little army of lecturers or educators and I in Wisconsin and get them out there
Mm-hmm.
because you learn so much. I can't tell you. I had tears in my eyes watching this Train the Trainer. I stayed for a little bit. These people were so committed, and these were your salt of the earth, line repairmen, uh, phone installers, office, call center, uh, phone people, you know, middle income working class people, union jobs. So they have something, but I can't tell you how committed they were and are uh, to the same stuff you're committed to. That's You could have been in this program and participate in every group, and you would have felt right at home. And you would say, "Wow, these are the people that we need. We need thousands more like this to help spread the word and to these are your everyday working people. You know, I mean, if you just all you have to do is be there for 5 minutes. I'd love to invite you to one of these at some point, so you could just when they start doing some training, just so you can see what's going on. I think you'd really value it, and it may give you some ideas of what you can do. The hard part is we're so polarized and society is so fragmented that where are the public arenas where you can reach other people? Social media. How do you get into other people's uh, educational flow? How do you do that in Wisconsin? I just don't know. I mean, I haven't done the work to figure that out, but I have a feeling you'll figure it out. If it can be figured out, you're going to find a way.
I think that's definitely something I'm interested in figuring out. But let's uh, your book is Runaway Inequality: An Activist Guide to Economic Justice. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's an amazing book. I mean, like I said, I think we know how bad it is until we actually read this book. It really is inspiring, and I definitely encourage everyone to go check it out. Les, where can everyone find you if they're looking to reach out to you
Easiest
or
to
look for you on social media?
easiest way you can get our whole curriculum in Spanish and English. You can get it online at runawayinequality.org. All one word, runawayinequality.org. That's where we put most of our stuff. I think we have a Facebook page as well, but it's really runawayinequality.org. And I'll make you an offer right here in public. If you find people to get the book out to, we'll get you the books. Don't worry about the cost. You can use the books for fundraising for your own organization. All right, because right now because of the you're getting a special here because of the uh, uh, COVID. Because normally what happens is I travel around, I do talks to large groups. Instead of paying me, I say, hey, everybody buy a book. We put the money back in the campaign. So we have a lot of books right now that we didn't get out. I'm more than willing to get them out to you, and then you can use them to fundraise, or you can use them. So if people want to get a copy of the book, they should contact you, and
Sounds good.
we'll get you the books.
I'll definitely take you up on that offer. Well,
All right.
everyone, Les Leopold, the co-founder of the Labor Institute and author of Runaway Inequality. We appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to keeping in contact with you.
Same here, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Les.